Number 6, 1967. Miles interviews Paul McCartney. Quote, "Everything I say will come out just a little bit different. I don't mean on the transcript, but as it leaves my mind and comes through my mouth. It gets a little bit messed up just around about the mouth, where the words start doing it." Unquote. Miles, are there any particular influences on your music? Paul, there's been millions. We started off being influenced by Carl Perkins and Chuck Berry, and Bo Diddley and People. But after a bit, we got a bit bored with all the 12 bars all the time, so we tried to get into something else. Then came Dylan, The Who, and the Beach Boys. I suppose we're all trying to do vaguely the same kind of thing. We are all trying to make it into something we know it is, but not many people know it is yet. Most people still think it's all just pop. It's a bit below every other kind of music, which of course it isn't. You see, by saying those influences, they're just the obvious musical people we pinch things off. But apart from them, anyway, you might as well say Huey Green was a big influence on me. Because he was, you know. You know what I mean? Everybody is. They all are. Miles, with the demolition of idols, do you find you are able to get a lot more from them? Because once you make someone a star, then whatever they are trying to say, the public automatically gets distorted. Well, that's true, and it's nice to have a star. A lot of people like it, and I think I do. It's always exciting when someone plays me a great record. It's great to have some incentive to be able to think, oh great, so-and-so's doing something great here. Stockhausen's onto something. Be nice to do something like that. So when you lose them as idols, it wrecks the incentive a little bit because you're looking at them so objectively. You know just what they are doing. And you just see their scene. And it's better in a way when you don't see their scene. Think of us as idols and how many groups must have started up because of it. And how much musical thought must have got going because of it. Miles, is this why you go back to people like Jari sometimes? Because he is dead and you can't possibly meet him and find out that he's just an unpleasant little Frenchman? Paul, yes, there is that. The thing is, this is the thing I've noticed about everything I seem to be doing. I'd prefer it if there was such a thing as magic. If magic things happened. So that magic happened in music. It used to happen a lot more in music for me until I started looking at it objectively after having written a bit. Then, what is still magic for other people? For me, it's a bit, well, okay, I see why he's done that and how he's done that, and I'll learn from it. But I tend to just take it in and file it instead of being knocked out by it, unless it's something very special. Yes, this is what I was trying to think of. With any kind of thing, my aim seems to be to distort it. Distort it from what we know it is, to see what it could be, to see the potential in it all, to take a note and wreck it and see in that note what else there is in it that a simple act like distorting it has caused. To take a film and to superimpose on top of it so you can't quite tell what it is anymore. It's all trying to create magic. It's all trying to make things happen so you don't know why they've happened. I'd like a lot more things to happen like they did when we were kids. When you didn't know how the conjurer did it and were happy to just sit there and say, well, it's magic. I use magic instead of spiritual, because spiritual sounds as if it fits into too many of the other categories. If something unbelievable happened, to most people at the moment, they'd explain it by taking a little cross-filing out of their brain and saying, well, of course, that doesn't happen, you know. They aren't ghosts. And they just explain it with a great realistic 20th century explanation for ghosts, which is that aren't ghosts, which is no fucking explanation at all. That couldn't have been a magic vision. That just happened then. I must have been a bit drunk. I must have been a bit high then. I don't believe that it ends with our Western logical thought. It can't do, because that's so messed up anyway. Most of it, that you have got to allow for the possibility of there being a lot more than what we know about. To bang one note on the piano instead of trying to put millions of notes into it, and just to take the one note of the piano and listen to it. There's so much going on in one note, but you never listen to it. So many harmonies buzzing around that if it's all happening in one note and in one frame of a picture, all that's happening. The thing is, it could take a bit of looking into. Ghosts. Miles. In the last few thousand years, only the materialistic side of man has developed and built up. Paul. The drag about this is everybody has realized there aren't such things as ghosts. There isn't such a thing as God, and there is no such thing as a soul. And when you die, which is great. It's fine. It's a brave thought, really. The only trouble is that you don't have the bit that you did when you were a kid of innocently accepting things. For instance, if a film comes on that's superimposed and doesn't seem to mean anything, immediately it's weird, or it's strange, or it's a bit funny to most people, and they tend to laugh at it. The immediate reaction would be a laugh, and that's wrong. That's the first mistake, and that's the big mistake that everyone makes, to immediately discount anything that they don't understand. They're not sure of, and to say, well, of course, we'll never know about that. There's all these fantastic theories people put forward about. It doesn't matter anyway. And it does. It does matter. In fact, it matters more than anything, that side of it. We've been in the lucky position of having our childhood ambitions fulfilled. We've got all the big house and the big car and everything. So then you stand on the plank, having reached the end of space, and you look across the wall, and there's more space. And that's it. You get your car and your house and your fame and your worldwide ego satisfaction. Then you just look over the wall, and there's a complete different scene there. That it really is, and which is really the scene. And looking back, obviously, you can still see everybody in the world trying to do what you've just done. And that is what they believe life's about. And they're right, because that is what I'm trying to do, exactly what I've just done. That's completely the wrong way to do it, because you're not taking into account the scene on the other side of the wall. This is the bit you've also got to take into account. And then that bit will be easier. It will be easier then. Miles. It's hard to take into account, though, because to gain material things, there is a well-established method. Well, I did tell you that George Martin was talking to us in the recording studio, and he came down and he said, somebody wants to see you. Somebody wants to talk to you. And we said, who is it then? And he said, oh, it's some crank talking about peace. And he was right. It was a crank talking about peace. because when you talk about peace, you're a crank, you're pigeonholed. You've associated yourself with Vietnam and sitting down in Trafalgar Square, and everybody thinks they know what you are. Then because they've seen these people in Trafalgar Square. And if you were to burn yourself, they'd know why you burned yourself, so it wouldn't matter. The thing that's grown up out of this material scene that everybody's got into is that for everything to exist on a material level, you've got to be able to discount any things that happen which don't fit in with it. And they're all very neatly disposed of these days. It's great. It's really very neat. I mean, the way, for instance, International Times would just be immediately labeled as just one of those papers. That's all. And pot is just that. Pot is just drugs. And LSD is just drugs. And every form of drugs is just a pit of iniquity, the black pit that terrible, decadent, disgusting people always fall into. There is no thought on anyone's part why anyone takes drugs, but there's a thought on their part why they drink, why they take drink. They're quite willing to think about why they take drink, why they need a drink, though they'd maybe not be willing to admit that they take drink to get drunk. Most people think, oh, no, I don't drink to get drunk. No, I take drink occasionally. I do take a drink at parties, but I must say I don't drink to get drunk. There's something dirty about drinking to get drunk. But if you do happen to get a bit drunk, it's all right. But nobody will ever admit that they're all standing there pissed because they wanted to get pissed, which is really the truth of it. And it must be the truth. Otherwise, they would get sick of Chronogate. Miles, how does this approach affect your dealings with people? I mean, it's a very isolated position, very objective, existentialist. Does it make contact easier or, Paul? It can do. The trouble is that the moment I haven't got it going yet. It's really a question now of seeing more of what it's about. It's a question of trying to put those things into practice, because when I think something which says the kind of thing that I've learned in days gone by, it tends to still stick, obviously just because of sheer weight, 22 years as opposed to 2, trying to learn it like this. I'm really at the beginning of the stage, so when people say, I see all your ambitions as Beatles have been fulfilled. You've just done about everything. You've played in every country in the world. What does it feel like? It feels exactly the same as it did when I was trying to get £5 for a guitar. It's a beginning again. There's no end. I know I'm going to need a new set of rules, and a new set of rules have got to include the rule that there aren't any rules. So, I mean, they're pretty difficult. It can make it difficult if you say a thing according to the new book of the prophet. They say things in reply according to the Old Testament. And you find yourself saying, well, yes, but I don't quite mean that. I know it sounds like that, but it is not. What I mean is, working on a new assumption of everything being fluid. You find yourself getting into cock-ups with words. It's a big battle at the moment, trying not to say too many words. And if there's a pregnant pause in the conversation, not feeling that I've got to fill it in, but let someone else who fears the silence fill it. I don't fear it anymore. Of course, it will need a bit of training, but the good thing about it is that if you are prepared to accept that things aren't just broad and wide, they're infinitely broad and wide. then there is a great amount to be learned. And the change over, it can be done. It just takes a bit of time, but it will be done, I think. Miles, are you trying to take anyone with you on it? Paul, yes, I'd like to. I don't want to be shouting to people, listen, listen, I found it. Listen, this is where it's at. And everyone going, oh, fuck off, you fucking crank. Because I see the potential in them as well, not just myself. I'm not just the great wizard who's going to sort it all out. I'm just one of them. And if I can see how I ought to have compassion, then it would be nice if they were going to see that too. Gap in electronics. There are quite a few people that are prepared for the next sound. They are ready to be led to the next move. The next move seems to be things like electronics, because it's a complete new field and there's a lot of good new sounds to be listened to in it. But if the music itself is just going to jump about 5 miles ahead, then everybody's going to be left standing with this gap of 5 miles that they've got to cross before they can even see what scene these people are on. I can see that it is a progression to accept random things as being planned. Random is planned as well, but most people won't accept that. And they need a lead-in to planned, and I can control the amount of random in it. They'll say, what for? Why don't you just write a nice tune? Or why don't you just write some interesting sounds? That's what I'd like to do. I'd like to look into that gap a bit. Neopolium. Miles, do people like Cage help you just by their existence because they have done so much work with random sound? It enables you to be a bit more free without worrying too much about it. Paul, yes, right. But those people always help. These become the new idols. Like then, it wasn't a question of listening to Elvis for him to become your idol. He was your idol. Elvis was the idol. There wasn't any question of ever having to seek him out. But the idols now, the people that I can appreciate now, are all much more hidden away in little back corners. They've just been pigeonholed into that because they're cranks about talking about peace. But you've got to sort out these people. You've got to look much more, because Stockhausen isn't played on Radio London every day. So there's not much of a chance of him becoming an idol overnight. Miles. It stems from people being afraid of each other, afraid to just open up the armor a little bit. Paul. I really wish that I could, at the back of my brain somewhere. There is something telling me now that. It tells me, in a cliche too, it tells me that everything is beautiful, which immediately comes out as phony, as ban the bomb. It tells me that everything is beautiful and that everything is great and fine. And instead of imposing things like vision show or, no, I don't like that theater. No, I like so-and-so. That I know really that it's all great and that everything's great and that there's no bad ever. If I can think of it all as great, in the last 2 years, at the most that I've ever tried to think of anything as being beautiful, having realized that I could think of everything as being incredible with a bit of effort or my mind's part on my part. So I'm only just starting to try to think of things like that. So it is still a little difficult, and it is still difficult to communicate with people. But the aim is to be able to one day sit there and not feel any of the hang-ups that people feel towards each other, not feel any of anything. It would be too much of a hang-up to fight this other 22 years and really try to kill it off in a year. To really try to sort it out in a year is too big a project. So at the moment, I'm just trying to operate within a new frame of reference. But I'm not pushing it, because to push it would really be to alienate myself completely from everything. It really would make me into a very sort of strange being as far as other people were concerned. Miles, you have a more difficult situation anyway, being a Beatle, because people's responses to you are always conditioned. So the added advantage of people being conditioned to listen to me in one kind of way. When you're listening to someone who's famous, you're prepared to listen. You're not going to shout at them down quite as much. If I knew how to say this all in 3 words to get it in over to everyone, I would be in a great position. At the moment, it's not so good, because anyone I do talk to talks to me in their conditioned way, and I can break that down. That's not too hard to break down, because it's pretty obvious anyway that it doesn't exist within me, and it only exists for them. Out of vague respect for you, for what you've done in one field. For instance, in the money field, what happens to impress a lot of people, which is in the fact the least impressive bit of it all. But that's the bit that impresses the most people. And so you find that a lot of 40-year-old men who would have never listened to anything I had to say are now a bit more willing, because they're trying to make the money like I've made it. So they think, well, Christ, he must. Hi, guys. How did you like that lovely, lovely article from the International Times? The International Times, issue number 6. 6 being Billy's number, right? I just find that very, very cheeky. And that's something that people who aren't aware of wouldn't grasp, right? So it's very cool. And the number 6 represents the great work, right? It is the joining of the opposites. So very interesting that Mr. McCartney saved his interview for the 6th issue. And he also did this interview in order to drive more advertisements, people advertising more in the International Times, because they were having issues with funding and printing. And McCartney said, well, if I'm in your magazine, then you're going to get a lot of other advertisers, music advertisers. And of course, he was right. So his celebrity brought in more money for the magazine. Plus, he invested a lot of money into the magazine and into the Indica bookstore. So it's like a circle of friends, right? I don't know. I really, in the article, if you look and see the headline, having reached the end of space, you look across the wall and there's more space. It's like, what? It's like that everything's so infinitely deep and philosophical, and we just have to remember that we're all beings floating around in chaos, but yet we can control that randomness, right? Through magic. Bring the magic back into music and art, right? Crowley says artists are magicians. myself being an artist, I don't agree with that. I mean, I can definitely see where that frame of mind, I can see where that is. I understand that frame of mind, but I don't consider it magic. I consider it a talent, a skill given to me from the Most High. So there's a big difference in, beliefs of all of that stuff. But I find it very interesting that it's all about magic in this time period, 1967. That was when they were getting ready to do the Magical Mystery Tour. The word magic just started kind of seeping in here and there in the culture, in the language, that everything became magical. Yeah, so I just wanted to, I find it very interesting that, you know, my thoughts on it and him investing money in this magazine. Obviously, the Beatles got a terrific platform of advertising in this rag. And I will continue to sort of put out bits and pieces here and there of their advertisements. Quite fascinating, actually, because they're almost in every single issue, as well as Miss Yoko Ono Ono. Very fascinating. Anyways, yeah, so I feel like all of the money that McCartney put into the bookshop, the art gallery, the magazine, right? Was this so he could have a platform? Being Horace, being the one who changes the course of society and culture, could do you see what I'm saying? Like, could he be investing in all of this to establish a platform to communicate the Crowleyanity and the Thelema philosophy, right? I really feel like that is what is going on here. Just with all this shit he says. And then he's also talking about being a crank because you're for peace and you're against Vietnam. You're a crank. I just love all of like the language, like people might get a bit twigged by it all. Like twigged. It's just funny language to me, and I just can't help but laugh when I hear him talking all of these, slang words back in the 60s that never really made it. It kind of reminds me of Mean Girls, like, stop trying to make fetch happen. It will never happen. Okay, anyways, guys, I just wanted, shoot the breeze with you and talk about the themes of this interview and what McCartney was pushing out into the atmosphere, right? He's pushing out the ideas of magic. He's pushing out the ideas of distortion, subversion, inverting things, changing things, flipping them on their head so the opposite comes through. It's all about duality. It's all about alchemy. It's all about all of this shit, guys. And yeah, I just find it really fascinating when, you are somebody who can understand the esoteric nature of something like this. It's like an onion. It's like you keep peeling back layer by layer by layer all of the mysteries that are held inside. And it's mind blowing. So I feel like in this interview, with the influence that this interview brought to the magazine, they were able to start opening up and talking about Crowley, talking about do what thou wilt, and this new aeon, right? We're going to read a lot more uh, interesting articles that talk about the Aeon of Horus straight up. So I just can't help but feel like this interview with McCartney, because I call him Billy McCartney, I will just refer to him as McCartney. Um, I feel like this was just a way for him, to get on that platform and start putting all of these ideas out into the world, spreading his father's message, right? Yeah. So that connection, I believe, is made, and can't really deny that. I feel like that's what helped get the messages of duality, of subversion, of alchemy, of transcendental meditation, of reincarnation, just all of these thoughts, right? Tune in, turn on, drop out, just all of these different concepts. And by investing in a sort of media based platform, McCartney was able to secure advertising for his band and was able to secure a platform to speak his truth and his philosophy, and how you just gently have to push people. Gently, gently, gently. Just like the boiled frog. Turn the heat up. Bit by bit by bit. The frog hangs out in the hot boiling water and boils itself to death. Right? Inch by inch by inch, they're pushing us into this new aeon so we can self-destruct. It's really, really a trip, and it's a trip to see that it's coming into our reality now. So anyways, guys, this video has been really, really long. If you're here with me till the end, thank you so much, and thank you for hanging out with me. I will be back with more articles, and yes, I'm sorry I haven't gotten on my Major Arcana series like I said I was going to do. I've been so fucking busy this last week. It just like buzzed by for me. So apologies on that. I will finish the last half of that series. So for those of you who are wondering, sorry I've kind of dropped the ball in that area, but gonna get back on the horse soon. So anyways, guys, I wish you nothing but blessings and happiness, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.